India marks its 80th Independence Day on August 15th, and Delhi is pushing ahead with one of its most ambitious strategic projects in decades. Nearly 1,500 kilometres from the mainland, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands was where Subhas Chandra Bose hoisted the tricolour on liberated Indian soil for the very first time, ahead of formal independence in 1947. Today, it is the focus of a multi-billion-dollar plan that Narendra Modi hopes will help lift India's economy and strengthen national security.
अंडमान एक ऐसी धरती है जहां पानी, प्रकृति, पर्यावरण, अंडमान का सामर्थ्य बहुत बड़ा है। यहां पर अथाह अवसर है। हमें इन अवसरों को पहचानना है। हमें इस सामर्थ्य को जानना है।
Sitting near the 6-degree channel, Great Nicobar Island is closer to Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia than to mainland India. It's also around 74 kilometres from the mouth of one of the world's busiest maritime choke points, the Strait of Malacca, measuring just 165 kilometres from Indonesia's closest point. In fact, in May this year, a Chinese professor from prominent Renmin University in Beijing writes that India's threat to China's reliance on the Malacca Strait is growing. He says, "We initially believed that the Malacca Dilemma stemmed mainly from the US and was highly linked to Sino-US relations. However, a new situation has emerged. India's role is indeed rising. In the past, India's own capabilities were limited, so we were not overly concerned. But now, the Malacca Dilemma seems more prominent because, in addition to the threat from the US, the challenge from India is also increasing." Why does India pose concern for China's reliance on the Malacca Strait? And as India marks a milestone birthday, we ask why this $9 billion plan to build a major maritime air and logistics hub matters. Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. With me to discuss this are, from New Delhi, S.B. Asthanda, retired Indian Army Major General, and in the studio, Roger Liu, Taiwan think tank Dimes Center Comprehensive Diplomacy Team Director. Also from New Delhi, we have Hindol Sengupta, OP Jindal Global University, Jindal School of International Affairs Executive Dean and Jindal India Institute Director. A very warm welcome to all of you to the show today. The Great Nicobar project sits at a critical junction in the Indo-Pacific. An estimated 50 to 60% of China's oil imports in recent years and a huge share of its trade transit the Malacca Strait. This reliance causes Beijing's so-called Malacca Dilemma, coined by Hu Jintao in 2003, which describes China's fear that its rivals could blockade the narrow waterway to cut off its lifeline. Along with warning of India's growing challenge, Jin Tianrong, director of the Center for Chinese Foreign Strategy Studies at Renmin University, goes on to make 3 suggestions to Beijing. First, accelerate the Blue Water Navy and the Fujian aircraft carrier's full combat capability. Second, pursue alternative routes, such as the port in Myanmar and the Kra Isthmus project in Thailand. And third, resolve the Taiwan issue as soon as possible. Once Taiwan is resolved, China will be able to focus its efforts on the East China Sea and South China Sea. If we manage the South China Sea well, we will be closer to the Strait of Malacca. Roger, so coming to you first, these comments from the professor at Renmin University, how remarkable are they and what should, Taiwan, US, Japan, Philippines, India take away from them?
Well, Jin Tianrong has been talkative on these issues. We always view him, too importantly, but...
So he's not representative?
Well, he is part of the propaganda warfare of China. So he's like Hu Xijin, the editor-in-chief of the Global Times. So we can read from his remarks that China actually has been very ambitious about how to conquer or how to master, how to control the area or the region, including stretching from South China Sea to Malacca Strait and enter the Indian Ocean.
Do you think that the takeaway from this is that Taiwan prevents China from being this unrestrained hegemon in this region?
Well, Taiwan indeed is very important in the first island chain, because if China actually takes over Taiwan, it will have entrance into the West Pacific region.
He's basically saying China's full capacity or capability can be released once Taiwan is taken.
Yes, well, that's his fantasy. But, well, if everything goes well, of course it's like that. But Taiwan is very hard to be taken over.
Okay. Going to Hindol, can you give us an overall sense of how New Delhi views this project, from the economic, military and political?
I have to underline to begin with that New Delhi does not at the moment project this project as something that it's doing to counter China per se. Please remember, these are very valuable maritime assets of India. And this Great Nicobar project, in fact, has been in the pipeline for a long, long time. We need to pull forward in a sense. In fact, the Great Nicobar project in some senses is one of India's most valuable maritime projects. We are building a major transshipment harbor there, a hub there. As you know, transshipment volumes are expanding exponentially, and our calculation is that a transshipment harbor here will be of great economic benefit, not just to India, but all other neighboring states that will benefit from this mega transshipment harbor. But of course, we have to also underline the fact that India is aware of what's happening in the Bay of Bengal and indeed in the Indian Ocean. It is aware of expanding Chinese forces and Chinese military capability and naval capability in this region. And therefore, in some senses, please remember, this project is defined as a dual-use project. So it can be, of course, it is, of course, primarily a civilian project, but it can be used as a military project too. So therefore, I have no doubt, and indeed there is no doubt in most commentators' minds, that in some senses, this is the forward defense in the maritime domain that India had been seeking for a long time, a project that had been thought of by many, many Indian governments, but finally, this is the government that is trying to push it through and make it happen. It's extremely valuable for India because we are extremely worried about you, and I'm sure your audience would have heard about this entire string of pearls theory that has been propagated for a long time. The encirclement of India via Chinese resources and assets across many maritime domains. And I believe this is one of the most important projects that India is building in the next decade.
Yeah, and Hindol, how urgent do you think this project has been made purely by the Iran war and all those disruptions to the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, we were always very concerned about this encirclement of India. We were very concerned about our own oil and gas supplies and the supply routes. And indeed, we recognize that China has been worried for a long time by what is generally known as the Malacca Dilemma. Now, these choke points have become absolutely critical after what's happened in the Strait of Hormuz. After COVID, I would argue that after COVID, which showed us tremendous disruption in economic supply chains, after which this entire phraseology of resilient supply chains really emerged. After that moment, the Strait of Hormuz crisis has been the biggest jolt to supply chain resilient anywhere in the world. Countries, especially India, who are really dependent on a lot of import of their oil and gas supplies, and I'm sure this is true for China also, they are thinking very hard about what is going to happen if some of these choke points actually, are not functionable. So therefore, when you think about that and you think about how critical the Malacca Strait is, it is impossible not to see how a Great Nicobar project also in some senses certifies and guarantees to a degree India's own supplies, India's own security in this domain.
Okay, let's go into that security aspect a bit deeper. Spanning 166 square kilometers, the Great Nicobar project centers on an international container transshipment terminal at Galathea Bay, a dual-use civil military greenfield airport, a gas and solar power plant, a new township. The Indian government frames the project as essential for national security, reducing dependence on foreign transshipment hubs such as Singapore, Sri Lanka's Colombo, and Malaysia's Port Klang. They also believe that it will further militarily strengthen the country's Andaman and Nicobar Command, India's only tri-service theatre command, with enhanced maritime domain awareness and forward presence near critical sea lanes. Many experts and backers of the project call Great Nicobar Island an unsinkable aircraft carrier, that it improves surveillance across the 6-degree channel and complicates any potential disruption of energy and trade routes vital to China and East Asia. So going to General Asthana, from a pure national security and military perspective, and obviously we have the right guest to talk to us about that, how transformative do you believe this dual-use infrastructure could be for India?
See, it is important, as I will take off from where Hindon left. What everybody perhaps realized was that geography is important. When it comes to military equations, it's not only the number of assets which you have. Whereas, so when the geography in Hormuz was in favor of Iran, obviously a lot changed. Similar is the situation in Strait of Malacca. Strait of Malacca is even busier than Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, what Chinese have been doing and where our security becomes important is that they have been trying to send their submarines in Indian Ocean. They've been trying to make those bases and string of pearls, which my co-panelists talked of. So, therefore, we also need to ensure our security. And how do we ensure that security? We also are looking at a dual-use port along with Indonesia in Sabang. So the north of Malacca Dilemma is taken care of by the Nicobar Islands and the south Sabang airport port.
Okay.
Also, I must highlight the commercial angle because that adds on to the security angle. As of now, our container traffic is being directed from some other container hubs. We need to have our own container hubs.
If I could just cut in there. So if you could explain to us, why is China worried about India developing the Great Nicobar project? I mean, is it to do with India actually having control over the Malacca Strait and potentially blockading it or shutting it down? Or is it not as simple as that?
Certainly, their fears, or whenever in military we do appreciations, I'm sure Chinese would also be doing their appreciations and their wargaming accordingly. So they know that if we face some awkward situation somewhere else, maybe in the Himalayas, this choking of Malacca Strait is possible. Let me also highlight this point. It is 0.2% landmass of India, but it has 30% of EEZ of India. That is the relevance of Andaman Nicobar. Also, all the actions which China has done to circumvent Malacca Strait, whether it is China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, whether it is Kyokfu Port, which you mentioned in the commentary, all have to pass through Bay of Bengal. And in Bay of Bengal, all these channels, you have Andaman Nicobar, which is reasonably spread out. And if you take the EEZ of Andaman Nicobar, I think we are reasonably placed. Similarly, the other options which they have worked out, Kra Canal did not work out. Thailand was not in favor. Economically, it didn't work out. Socially, it didn't work out. And also, the threat to Chinese traffic did not get reduced, even by Kra Canal. They have other channels like Lombok Strait and Sunda Strait, but then they have the distance penalty if they want to use those straits. So therefore, Malacca is inescapable. Similarly, let me also give you some more statistics. Anything which China transships through Malacca Strait, if it is $2.5 per unit of trade, then through any other option which they have tried to create, it is more than $10. So it is 4 to 5 times costlier option than Malacca Strait. And therefore, Malacca Strait remains crucial. And that is why perhaps China is worried, because let me also put it in context of Taiwan. Let's say hypothetically, if Taiwan is blockaded, then perhaps there is an option if the situation develops in a manner which is hypothetical as of now. But then the fact is, if they are cut off in Malacca Strait, then they have a problem at hand, because then their blockade loses its value. And perhaps that is one contingency which they are thinking about. And that is why earlier the comment which you read out of the Chinese strategist, that falls in place there. So these are some of the worries of China as compared to that. As far as India is concerned, our small point is very clear, as Professor mentioned very clearly. We are not looking at the military value as of now. We are looking at the dual use value. It is not against China. And I repeat, it is not against any other country, and it is not against any, is not a part of a plan of dominance. We are only looking at utilizing our resources in a manner which benefits the interest of India.
Roger, I do want to stay on the security aspect a little bit longer. So does it fear perhaps a Taiwan conflict, or is that a lot more complicated a picture, not so direct an impact?
Well, I would say that the existence of India and especially the strengthening of or fortification of the Andaman and Nicobar actually creates more uncertain situations for China during a scenario where China and Taiwan will get into a conflict over Taiwan Island.
Complicates China's planning.
Yeah. Because, well, first we have to understand that the Chinese Navy is much bigger than the Indians. And Andaman and Nicobar is, like you said, far away from the mainland of India. So they actually don't put much emphasis over there because that's not a wise thing to do. So there's only a flotilla, which is part of a fleet of the Indian Navy stationing in Andaman and Nicobar. And this is not enough to, counter the incoming Chinese force. But what they can do over there is to create some uncertainty. First, they can put the anti-ship missiles over there. India has the supersonic BrahMos missile, so that will cause some kind of deterrence. Secondly, can be used as an air base where India can, apply the drones to do some reconnaissance plans. So, and thirdly, India can pose some of their submarine forces over there, and that will create a lot of uncertainty for the Chinese to apply their naval forces in the area or trying to cut. If India try to work with the US and allies to cut off the energy supply of China, they can do that.
Okay, so just going back to Hindol, we're going to take a look at the map of Indian versus Chinese influenced ports or bases, and this is taken from Eurasian Times. The map cites, as we can see, east of India or eastern coast of India, going further east, 3 Chinese-linked ports or bases: Myanmar's Sitowa Port, Bangladesh's Chittagong, and Sri Lanka's Hambantota, which are matched by the 2 Indian bases of Visakhapatnam and Port Blair, and the US-linked base of Singapore. So firstly, I just want to get your assessment. Do you agree with this categorization of these ports and bases? And what capability would this extra base, which, as you've both mentioned, is not just a base, but it's commercial, it's developmental, would it give India that Port Blair and the other ports don't already have?
This is, we have to look at this project in an integrated sort of way. So there are 2 things for India to do, both of which are delivered by this Great Nicobar project. One, of course, is to really advance economic strength and integrate, build economic capacity that would integrate to neighboring economic capacity. And that's what the transshipment harbor does. There is a need for a large transshipment harbor there because the volumes are really exponentially rising. The second thing is, we have to build some sort of capability and capacity that in a, God forbid, in a time of crisis tomorrow, we can counter China and some of these things in those waters, and taking our forward defense right up to the mouth of the Malacca, which is what this Great Nicobar project does, gives us potentially, if it is ever needed, the ability to make an intervention in a time of crisis. This is the kind of capability India needs for its defense today, and that's why this project is so important.
General, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Malacca Strait that this project, Great Nicobar, could give India the potential to close or blockade the Malacca Strait. But we know that Nicobar and the Malacca Strait itself, of course, is bordered by 4 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, and that they control the Malacca Strait. Could India in any way sort of act unilaterally in this aspect? And then related to this project, how does India strengthen its position without making those states feel that New Delhi is encroaching on their role?
You are absolutely right that this is not unique to India, and there are other players as far as Malacca Strait is concerned. There is no doubt about it. At the same time, when we are looking at the strategic picture, we are also not looking at India separately. Because if you recall, India getting into Quad was one of the reasons, although Quad by definition has nothing to do, it has no military orientation as of today. But then there is a fact that all these navies of all these countries which you mentioned, and also additionally other countries which you did not mention, that is the Quad navies as well as France, we are doing exercises with all of them in this area. So therefore, if you have interoperability with these countries, the combinations can be made and intentions can change overnight. Now, this is something which happened in past, which has also happened elsewhere. So certainly, there is no doubt that we need to be prepared for such combinations. We don't know which kind of combination can play when there is a situation of this kind. At the same time, when you are looking at China having these ports, even the Chinese ports, whether it is in our neighborhood, none of them is a military port. But it is only an appreciation that they can be used in that manner if required. But if, as per the face value, there is hardly any port and which can be classified as military port. Their military vessels do turn up there, but then that is happening all over the world. Even our military vessels are also going all over the world. So I don't think that's a big concern. So I think that answers your question.
Okay. Roger, just sort of playing devil's advocate, what would be the weakest link for this Great Nicobar project?
I will be taking a very different stance from other guests around over here. Well, Andaman and Nicobar is far away from anywhere else. So if you wanted to be the Hong Kong of India, that would be very challenging.
When you say far away, but it's very close to the Malacca Strait.
Well, by 1,000 nautical miles or more than that. Well, actually,
165.
well, it's not that close because the sea actually is very large. So if you compare with the Malacca Strait, Singapore is right on that, right? But well, at the north opening, actually, Nicobar Island is besides that. So it's
sure,
it's
but Colombo is not.
Right. But Colombo is very close to the mainland of India, while Andaman and Nicobar is far away from India and far away from Southeast Asia, far away from Myanmar. So it's in the middle of the Bay of Bengal. So that will be hard. And secondly, I think the major value of the Andaman and Nicobar Island lies in its military values, because India needs it to be a very important military basis around there. They have built listening posts around there to intercept radio communication between China and other countries. Well, they have established some kind of naval bases around there so that whenever it is in need, they can use that. And that's the place which is most suitable for establish a military base. It's more like a Diego Garcia or other, lands far away from the mainland. The geopolitical position or location is very convenient for India. But if you want to build it into a commercial center, I think that would be challenging.
So what you're saying is the military side works, but the commercial side maybe not so well.
The military side will be more potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going to Hindol, do you agree with that analysis from Roger?
No, I think, while I understand where Roger is coming from, I do believe if you look at the sheer volume of transshipment in those waters that are growing, I do believe that there is a lot of opportunity. And I think others would benefit in the region also from the construction of this additional capacity that would take care of the exponential rise in transshipment that we are seeing in that route.
Okay. Roger Liu in the studio. Thank you so much. Also, Major General S.B. Asthana from New Delhi, as well as Hindol Sengupta. Thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.